podcast or to the replay. Thanks for being here. I'm Elisa Meredith, Content Marketing Manager at Tailwind, and I am joined today by the one and only Mike Alton, the social media hack. Thanks for being here, Mike.
I'm just finishing a blog post. Excuse me.
Hello. Is that your third one of the day?
The third one. Hopefully Mia's watching. That's just for her.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. And by the reaction from all the event shares going on, people are really excited to hear about this. So, I mean, usually I'm here talking about Pinterest or Instagram, so this is a little bit different. So I kind of called this one Blogging, the Foundation for Pinterest Marketing Success. Do you think that's a good title?
I think that's great. Okay. You know, it's problematic sometimes when we see people who want to create an entire business on a social network, right? And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but when you've got content on a different site that you can share, particularly to Pinterest, I think that's a great recipe for success.
Yes, I agree. So, I mean, you can use Pinterest with, we're getting people saying there's no sound. So let me just make sure that somebody can hear us. Sometimes if you will just refresh your browser, that will bring the sound back for you.
Okay. So some people can hear, some people can't.
Yeah, it's usually a refreshing thing. Okay, you've got sound. So it's probably not on our end then. Our sound is going out. So if you could try refreshing.
Kath can hear, everybody can hear.
Kath, okay, excellent. Thank you, Kath. And okay, the refreshing did work. Okay, excellent. So just to recap, we are talking about blogging being the foundation for a good Pinterest strategy because, well, you got to have something to link to, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So I know I have worked with people who don't have a blog and they maybe want me to do Pinterest promoted pins for them or help them with the Pinterest strategy. And there's not much I can do. You know, you can pin product photos all day long. And yeah, sometimes it does work, but it works better if you're Mayfair or Target and you can put $20,000 a month towards promoted pins. And most of us just can't do that. So we're going to need some blog posts. So let's get to our questions. So, all right. Is there a difference between blogging for search engine traffic and blogging for Pinterest?
Yeah, I would say so because search engines are looking for something a little bit differently than Pinterest users specifically. Now, you'll see lots of conversations online and even in my site about blogging for search engines and whether or not you should be blogging for people and that sort of thing. And that's one discussion. But the question is there a difference between blogging for search engines and Pinterest? And Pinterest means that you're looking to communicate with people who are on the Pinterest platform, either on the app or on the website, right? And they're pinning, and they're usually pinning for a purpose. They're trying to save information. They're searching for how to do something. Maybe they're just browsing their feed. That happens, right? But it's different than somebody who's using a search engine because Pinterest is so visual and you have such a limited amount of time to capture their interest. There's so many other things going on. So yeah, I think there's definitely some differences there. One of which is making sure that you've got multiple images and you can pin to multiple boards. That has nothing to do with search engines.
Right.
That I could probably make the argument that I could make that work for good SEO, but it's a stretch. That's really for Pinterest.
Yeah. And I have encouraged people, if they don't have time to really get into deep blogging, like some people we know who write a 15,000 word blog post, on a regular basis, like Mike Alton. But even if you only write a couple of hundred words for your blog post, if you have a beautiful image, you have several pinnable images like you mentioned, yeah, it's probably not going to rank on Google. But if most of your traffic is coming from Pinterest, that can work great. So
that's a really great point. Content that Google would tend to practically ignore, short form content, what I sometimes call cheater posts, right? They might do really, really well on Pinterest. I mean, my number one pin on Pinterest is a beautiful picture of some painted mural steps in Spain. Okay. I mean, it has nothing to do with my content. It was just a really good looking picture, right? Yeah. And there's not a meaty article tied to the back of that pin.
Oh.
People are just pinning because they like it.
Yeah.
And so obviously that's not necessarily the kind of content we always want, because that's not really doing anything for my brand. But a lot of the other high performing pins that I have, they are doing things for my brand. And it doesn't matter how long the article is that they link to.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that. So I think for some people, they might feel like that Google SEO ship has sailed for them, but there's always that Pinterest SEO ship, and that takes a lot less work. It depends on what kind of work you like to do, but I find it a little bit easier. So your article, which again is on the social media hat, and let me just share your link here, because it is a gigantic blog post, but you can also download it as a PDF version if you feel like you'd rather print it out and have it there so you can make notes. It's fabulous. I mean, I've been blogging since, I guess, 2010 or so. And a lot of the things in there were things that took me years to figure out, and I couldn't have put them into the words that Mike did. So please check it out. If you're new, it will save you a ton of frustration and it'll get you where you want to go a lot faster. And if you've been around a while, just don't let the title that says how to start a blog scare you off. There's a lot of good stuff in there. So it points out, rightly so, that we shouldn't rely on social as our blogging platform. So I would lump into that. I would say LinkedIn, Facebook, even sites like Medium. We really need to have our own blogs. Why is that important?
Yeah, and I use Facebook as an example inside the article, but you're absolutely right. Any of these other third-party platforms, particularly the ones where you're creating something for free, whether it's a Facebook page or a blogger account or anything like that, you don't own that content.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, you're putting your content at risk. And most people, I got to be honest, I am blessed with the gift of being able to write quickly and write well. And of course, I've had years of practice, so that helps hone that gift. I know not everybody else finds it as easy to blog. Most of the people that I talk to, they'll spend hours on a single blog post, which means you're investing a lot of time in the content that you're creating. And heaven forbid, you put all that effort into a platform and then you lose it. And that happens. It happens on an individual basis. People will have their Facebook page or their Medium account or their LinkedIn profile shut down, rightly or wrongly. Doesn't really matter. The end result's the same. They've lost that account. And we also have entire platforms that have just gone away. Posterous. I don't know how many of you remember Posterous. Posterous was a blogging platform that Twitter bought about 6 years ago. 4 million users. 4 million people were blogging on Posterous. It's like Tumblr, only not quite so gift focused, right? And then Twitter decided, you know what? This isn't working for us. We're shutting it down. They lost everything. They had opportunities to try and move it and then rebuild somewhere else, but they lost their blogs. So that's the number one reason why I say don't ever try to start a blog if you're serious about blogging. I mean, if you're just talking about what you do on the weekends and you want to journal it that way, that's fine. That's a personal blog, and we're not talking about that. But if you want this to be a business, if you want to make money, whether it's a part-time gig or you want this to be a full-time income down the road, you got to own that content. And then secondly, it's got to be on a platform where you control the entire environment, not just owning it, but you have the ability to brand it. You have the ability to make sure that at every point along the way, no matter where a reader comes into your site, you can direct them. You can push them through the kind of journey, the kind of funnel that makes sense for the kind of business that you've created. And you can't do that with a Facebook page. You just can't.
True. Yeah, so you even recommended not using WordPress, WordPress.com, right? But why would that be?
Yeah, I get them confused too. So I don't know. I'll say the free WordPress, right?
The free WordPress, right? Not WordPress.org where you download it and put it on your own hosting.
Yeah, don't use the free WordPress because again, for a lot of the same reasons. You've got less control, you've got less ability, you've got less ownership, and quite frankly, it doesn't look impressive when you're using a free platform of any kind.
Right.
Try to build a business. How many times have you ever bought something from that kind of a site? You know,
Yeah,
I mean, if you're going to, as an online consumer, we're becoming more and more savvy and more concerned about security and, you know, where we're putting our money and that sort of thing. I would think twice before I gave a site like that my credit card. You know, if it's obvious to me that it's not a professionally done site. So that,
yeah, I feel like if this business is serious to you, you need to take yourself seriously enough to put some work into it.
Yeah.
So,
And we're not talking a lot of money, you know,
right,
I mean,
no.
$50, $100 a year tops. You know, I mean, I work for SiteSell, you know, and we do solo build it, which includes a lot more than just the site. Even with that, even with all the education and the tools that we pour into a solo build it membership, that's still only $300 a year.
Oh, wow.
What's that for the kind of business that you can create and the kind of income that you can create? It's nothing.
Yeah. And that way you don't have to learn to be a WordPress guru, right?
True.
Yeah. I used to attempt to do that for a living. I wasn't very good at it. I think it's worth learning a little bit of coding so you know how to tweak things that you can't do with the drag and drop. But other than that, you really don't need to know what you're doing to make it beautiful.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So let's talk about our blog. So we have a good blog, a reputable looking site on a good server. What are some things we can do to our blog itself to make it so people are more likely to share to Pinterest? Because that's what we're talking about, making Pinterest work with our blog.
Well, like you always talk about, the first thing you have to have is pinnable images, right? It's got to be tall images and usually then a variety of images, because one image is okay. That's great for you and I, but you want to give people choices, and then you want to give yourself choices. Like I mentioned earlier, when you've got more than one board, you know, I've got multiple blogging boards on my Pinterest profile. I've got because I've separated it out, right? So I've got the blogging basics, and then I go into some more advanced topics like blogging for sales or blogging for authority, because those are kind of niche topics, and I've got different content that goes into those boards. But I might have an article that touches on all those topics, like how to start a blog, right? Because I'm touching on a lot of different topics within that one massive piece. Sure. So Tim says, you're so tall, that's why you do well on Pinterest. That's right. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, so I'm able to pin the same piece of content to different boards without having to use the same image each and every time, which is very effective.
Right. Okay, so if you want to see what he's talking about, I've posted a link to Mike's Pinterest account. So go check it out, how he's divided up his boards. You'll see the same content, different images on different boards, which is a great way to do it. So let's just go back for 1 second. Tim Lewis, our buddy Tim here, hamming it up in the comments as usual, but he has a really good point here. I think you need HTTPS now. I'm in the process of upgrading myself at the moment. So can we define what that is and what he's talking about?
Yeah. So up until a few years ago, every site was HTTP, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. That just meant that was the first part of any URL that you go to, and kind of define the language of that particular site. And then as security became more and more important, we added the ability to add a security certificate to any site that would encrypt the information going between the site server and the individual user's browser. So here I'm on Tailwind's website right now, and so I've got it open inside my Chrome browser, and I'm sending some information about myself via Chrome through the internet to whatever server Tailwind's website is hosted at. And in order to make sure that that information continues to be safe throughout that entire journey, we're adding encryption. So that's very technical, I know, but here's why that matters.
Okay.
Because of the recent increased fervor about security, Google has said, we think as users are browsing the web, they are becoming more and more aware of whether or not the sites they're using are secure, whether they have an HTTPS connection or not. And they're starting to prefer an HTTPS connection. Because remember, Google's entire business is based on showing you a set of search results for your intended search and watching which results you choose. And the more people choose a particular result for whatever reason, that result ends up getting ranked higher and higher and higher. So they're saying You got to have security. You got to secure your website with an SSL certificate so that that information is encrypted, so that, number one, we can make sure our users' data is encrypted. Right. What they really care about is making sure that they're giving you the best possible results and that people aren't skipping down the line. Okay. So there's a process. Unfortunately, this isn't a simple thing. You have to buy an SSL certificate, or you have to be hosting with a company that gives you one, which is becoming more and more prevalent these days.
I think so.
And you install it, you set it up on your hosting account. For most hosting situations, that's just a push of a button, right? Good. So it's not like you have to literally install anything on the server.
Good.
But what happens next is, now that your site is secure, there's usually some other steps that have to be taken, because having the certificate is just part of the entire process of making sure your site's secure. The other big consideration is, within the pages of your site, what are you linking to? You've got embedded images, you've got other pages that you link to internally, other pages that you link to externally, maybe some other scripts and resources that you're calling. They all have to be secure.
Oh boy. So how important is this for a blogger whose traffic mostly comes from Pinterest?
Oh, that's a good question. It's definitely less important.
Okay.
And it's something we talked a lot about this year, again, over at SiteCell, because we just implemented a way for our members to almost automatically convert their entire sites to secure. And every new customer that comes in is secure. So if you're starting your blog today, start it with HTTPS, start it with a secure certificate. But if you've been blogging for a while, you've got some thinking to do. You need to look at your Pinterest traffic, but you also need to look at your Google organic traffic and look at the trend. Are you trending up with Google organic traffic, and do you want to put that at risk? Or is it truly flatline? Do you really get absolutely no Google organic traffic, and you have no hope of ever getting Google organic traffic? If that's the case, then don't worry about it.
Okay.
In fact, one might argue that if you're not getting Google traffic now is the time to do it.
Yeah, I know. Really, it's going to
be. Here's the thing: when you switch from HTTP to HTTPS, what you're doing is creating a new URL structure for your entire site.
Mm-hmm.
It counts as a different link.
Right.
So let's say, give you a simple example. Let's say my site before I switched had 100 backlinks. After I switch, I'm going to lose some of those backlinks because some of them used http://www.thesocialmedia.com.
Yeah.
They used the full HTTP link, and now it will resolve. It'll work if someone clicks on it, but it works because my server redirects the person, not because it's the correct link. Other people who might have just used www.thesocialmediahat.com, those links remain. That's why it's not 100% across the board.
Yeah,
you also will lose some social signals.
Oh.
You'll lose Facebook likes. And I forget, I think you lose Pinterest shares. You used to lose Google Plus. That doesn't matter anymore because everybody has Google Plus gone.
Yeah.
So if you're going to switch, I highly recommend you have Social Warfare installed.
Yes. You need to have that anyway.
You need to have it anyway. Yeah. It's the best social sharing plugin, particularly for WordPress. But if you have Social Warfare installed, after you do the switch, you can do what's called share count recovery. And Social Warfare will go out and look at all of your non-HTTPS URLs and all of your new HTTPS URLs and combine all the share counts on their end in their database so that all of your share buttons display the total number of shares, no matter what version of the URL was shared.
Okay. Yeah, another thing I like about that, and I just shared the link here, is that you can have two different images. So like you were saying, how we can make our blogs more pinnable. So having great images, but having that shorter blog header image at the top, but then you can also have a nice tall pinnable image. And that the easiest way to do that, I think, is Social Warfare.
No doubt. My site, unfortunately, is not on WordPress, and that's a whole nother story. But because it's not, I can't use Social Warfare, so I had to hack it. I had to use some CSS, which fortunately I know, and I had to create my own Pinterest image field and hide it so that people don't see it when they're on my site, but I'm still able to upload that tall image that Pinterest sees or that Shareaholic sees when you click the pin button and you go share to my site.
Yeah, but we don't want to have to do that. So I have a question from Tim about the hosting or the platform. So he's teaching his students when they get started to try out the free WordPress to get started, and then when they're starting to take it more seriously, maybe move them to a self-hosted site. What do you think about that approach?
Yeah. Hey, Tim. So it's interesting because to me, that goes back to the intent. Now, if you're a student, you're not just learning how to blog, right? You're probably figuring out what it is you're going to blog about. You don't have a business plan. You're learning everything and being very intentional about the fact that you're learning and not trying to start a business. So in that case, sure, why not? Start with something free. Use Facebook Notes if you want to, or free WordPress or LinkedIn, whatever's convenient for you. That's fine.
Yeah.
At some point, there's going to be a pivot. At some point, each one of those students, and it's going to be different for everybody. Some at the end of the course, if it's like a college level course, that's it. They're done and they'll never touch it again.
Right.
But some of them might enjoy it so much and might see so much success that they want to pivot that into a real business. And then absolutely at that point, you got to move it into a real environment where you can make a professional go out of it.
Yeah. And if you have some great posts on the free account, you can export them and import them into the new install, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So
but that's the key, because what you're doing is you are moving.
Yeah.
You're moving that content, which means from a website perspective, you're starting over.
Yeah.
You've got that content, so at least you get to repurpose it and republish it and so on. But, totally different URLs. All the share counts are gone. Any backlinks you might have created are totally gone, unrecoverable. So we want to avoid that if we possibly can.
Okay. So do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Seems like, okay, great. So you talk about the blogger's mindset quite a bit. I want to know what that is and what it can do for us.
So at a high level, the blogger's mindset is keeping your blog in the back of your mind throughout your day. Whenever you're having conversations, whenever you're answering questions, whenever you're consuming information, whether it's television or articles or whatever the case might be, you've trained your mind, and I teach people how to do this. You've trained your mind so that you're constantly aware at some level of what it is you're consuming or speaking, and you can then easily turn that into blog posts.
Okay.
Give you an example of what I'm talking about. When you're on social networks, Facebook, and you're in a group and somebody asks a question that you know the answer to, right? You see that post. So you said, okay, I've got some time. So I jump in and I start to answer that question. If that's me and I'm answering somebody's question and it takes me more than a couple minutes, if I'm writing more than a couple sentences, my brain immediately starts to trigger and say, okay, Mike, this might make for a good blog post, right? Because if one person asks the question, other people want to know the answer to that same question. And if you're going to spend 5 or 10 minutes crafting an answer, why not turn that into a blog content? I've actually literally copied and pasted comments from Google Plus or Facebook or LinkedIn into my blogging system and turned them into blog posts relatively quickly, because I've already formulated the thoughts. Sometimes it really is just a straight copy and paste into a blog post. Sometimes I format it, expand on it, edit it, whatever the case might be. But it's the point there, though, is the blogger's mindset helps you maintain awareness of these possible blog posts so that you aren't ever just staring at a white screen thinking, all right, Mike told me I'm supposed to publish a blog post every single day or every single week, whatever the case might be, but I don't know what to say, right? That never happens to me. I have this giant system of blog post ideas, blog posts that are in progress. I could have a new blog post out within an hour if I wanted to, because I have this reservoir to draw from, and I'm constantly refilling it and topping it off with all these different ideas that come to me throughout the day.
Okay, so let's do a little recap here for anyone who's come in newly. So we're I mean, we're the Pinterest and Instagram people over at Tailwind, right? Visual marketing. So why are we talking about blogging again, Mike?
Because you have to have content to point them to.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
You're right. You're right.
That means you have to write. I'm sorry, but you've got to write. You don't have to write books, but you got to write something.
Yes, you do. Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like we should challenge Mike Alton to write one in an hour. I don't think that's a challenge for him, sadly. I have to up the stakes on that somehow.
That's right.
Okay. So once we get people from Pinterest to our blog, how do we keep them on the blog longer so we can get them to do something?
That's a great question. And it's something that I really focus on a lot with new bloggers, because as a new blogger, you're concentrating on creating a piece of content, and it can be exhausting and frustrating and challenging and so on. And you create that one piece of content because you're talking about a particular topic, and that's it. And you just conclude your thoughts and you leave them there. And as a new blogger, you don't realize that it's inherent to you. It's up to you to give your readers the next step. What are they supposed to do now? They've gotten to the end of your article. Hopefully they've enjoyed it. Hopefully they've learned something. What are they supposed to do next? And that's the number one way that I keep people on my site, is at the end of every single article, there's what's called a CTA, or a call to action. Now, that might be an actual business related CTA, like subscribe, buy, call me, follow me, something along those lines. But it doesn't have to be that. You can send them into another article. I just published an article today where I just kind of walk people through setting some expectations for how long it really does take to make money when you start blogging. Because some people think, I'm going to start a blog and, I'll get my first check tomorrow. That does not happen. It takes a long time, 6 months or more for most people. So I walked them through that. And then at the very end of the article, I just flat out said, your next step is to go over to how to start a blog. Whether you've started one or not, this is where you need to go next and review all that information so that you get yourself moving in the right direction at the right pace. So that's the number one thing that every blogger has to have, is a next step at the end of every article. The number two thing is just to make sure that throughout the article, you link to other resources inside your site. Definitely outside your site as well. It's great to have external resources that help back up the things that you're saying, help lend their authority to the comments you just made. But you should also be referencing other content that you've written and give people opportunities to click through and explore your site. Don't just expect that they'll look at your menu or your sidebar, and explore on their own.
Right.
Probably not. Most of the people who come to your site, and this is pretty much true across the board, most of your visitors are going to be new, and most of them are going to look at one page and bounce out. Mm-hmm. Whether it's 50%, 80%, it's going to be most of your traffic. So what you want to do is minimize that as much as possible. Understand that most people are new. Understand that most people are really just coming for an answer to a specific question. And you need to give them a reason to stick around. What else can you entice them with? What else can you teach them that's related to what you just wrote about?
Right. So I know you have some CTAs that will lead to content downloads. So like if you're on your how to start a blog, you have that in PDF form. So how do you feel about pop-ups or slide-ins?
I love pop-ups.
Yeah, but because they work.
Because they work. No kidding. But here's the thing that I have. I don't hate technology. This is pretty much across the board. I never hate technology. What I hate, and what most people truly hate if they thought about it, is they hate how other people implement technology.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody wants to come to a site and be bombarded with pop-ups. Nobody wants to, spend 5 minutes on a site and every minute they're having to exit out of some other kind of offer. That's too much. Mm-hmm. It's not the pop-up's fault. It's the site owner who did it wrong. It's just like Twitter auto DMs. I'm going to touch some nerves here. I loved Twitter auto DMs. I loved them. I missed them. They were so effective for me because I'm the only one in the world who was doing them right. I had a Twitter auto DM that would warmly and conversationally greet a new follower. Not, hey, thanks for being a new follower, but a very conversational message that led them to one of my best blog posts, how to promote a blog post. I said, I used to struggle with, all the different things that I had to do to promote a blog post, but then I figured it out and then I wrote about it. I just thought you might be interested in it. People would thank me.
Wow.
People would thank me for my auto DMs. Nobody else can say that except maybe Andrew and Pete.
I was going to say, theirs was awesome. It was like, if you want to come punch us in the nose for sending you a DM, and then you could go and punch them in the nose. It was really fun.
Yeah, but I get everybody else hating on auto DMs because most of the world used them wrong. Most of the world just used it to auto spam, and that's not what we want. Same thing with pop-ups. When you go to my site, if this is your first time, the first thing that's going to come down is a welcome mat. And I know it's intrusive. I get that. But it's an extremely important piece of content that I want to make sure all of my visitors see. It's a free kit, a free resource kit on how to really do well on Facebook. And it performs amazingly well because most of the people who come to my site love it. They're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I definitely want that. Thanks, Mike, for showing me that, even though I came to your site to learn about, I don't know, something about Google Analytics, but whatever. So that works. Exit intents also work. I experiment with them. Now, the one thing I'll say, don't do what I do. I say this often. I call myself a content marketing practitioner because I'm always testing. I'm always experimenting. I do have 3, maybe 4 different pop-ups running on my site. And depending on how you come into my site and how you use the site, it's possible you might see all 4 of those pop-ups in one session. I wouldn't recommend that for most people. Most businesses should probably have 1, maybe 2. Have a welcome mat if that works for your audience, and maybe have an exit intent for someone who's getting ready to leave the site. And that's it.
Well, but you brought up a good thing that we need to keep in mind is if it works for your audience. So don't put it up there and then never look to see how it's performing. Because if it's performing badly, chances are it's annoying people. So you'd be better off without it.
Yes. Yeah, and you can tell. I mean, you can do experiments. I use Sumo for my pop-ups, which is great because I can do all kinds of different tests, and I can change when the pop-ups show, how big they are, how small they are. I can test different copy, different placement, different timing, all these different things. It's great.
Okay, cool. So Tim has a question about whether you use specific PDFs for individual pages.
I haven't yet, but I hope that's where I'm moving to, and that's only because creating massive digital downloads is something that I only started doing, I think, maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3. So it's taken me a while to kind of ramp up a library. At first, it was my LinkedIn guide, how to craft a really good professional LinkedIn profile if you're not looking for a job. Right. If you're a blogger like me and you want to use LinkedIn for networking, what does that look like? So I turned that into an ebook. And then I created one about epic content. And then I created one about spring cleaning social networks and so on. So as I've continued to grow my library of digital downloads, Tim's point is spot on. If you've got different kinds of content and different kinds of topics that you're talking about, matching up those pop-ups and offers with the content is definitely going to increase the relevancy. I saw it with my Facebook one.
Sure.
I created the Facebook kit because prior to that, I was using a how to promote a blog PDF as my main welcome offer. And most of my site traffic is interested in social media content, not necessarily blogging content. And so when I created this social media piece of content all about Facebook, it was like 2, maybe 3 times the conversion rate. Wow. I mean, it was an incredible difference simply because I started offering something that's really more in tune to what my audience was looking for.
Excellent point. Yeah, we try to do that on the Tailwind blog, whatever we're blogging about. And sometimes I'll actually create a quick checklist to go with that specific blog post if there's time. There isn't always time, but like you said, over time, you can start to create a library of offers that will work with pretty much anything you're blogging about. And that's where we want to get to at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned how we can get people from Pinterest to your site to maybe go to another page, maybe sign up. But do you have any suggestions on how to get them to buy something from your site?
Well, that's going to depend so much on your business. In fact, that's what I talked about in today's article. There's three main factors that will impact how long and how much money you can expect to reasonably make from your site. One of them is your topic. One of them is how often you're going to blog. But another one's how you're monetizing. And that kind of speaks to your question. If you have products for sale, that kind of lends itself to one kind of approach. You can blog about how products can be used and the benefits of certain products and case studies and that sort of thing, and lead that reader almost directly into that blog post, right? Mm-hmm. But if you have a different monetization model, let's suppose that what you're selling is a course, and that course is on a very advanced topic. That means that you want to lead people into that advanced topic. And usually that means drawing people in with a more basic topic, right? Like, let's say it's email marketing. Okay, so you've got an advanced course on how to sell via email, but first you've got a really basic course on how to get started with email marketing or some blog content, something along those lines. And what you're having to do is set up funnels. Right, where there are different steps along the way. And it's hard because you have to think about your customers. You have to think about the journey that they're going on before they become a customer. What questions do they have? What information are they looking for? And what answers can you provide to step by step walk them through that, or walk alongside them towards that end goal of becoming a customer, making a purchase of some kind.
Yeah, now I'll say I have worked with HubSpot, and that is fabulous for funnels. I've worked with Infusionsoft, and that works too. I found it a little difficult to use personally, but I've also done some of that with MailChimp since they added the automation, and that it's not as maybe simple as HubSpot. It's not as powerful for sure, but it does work, and it's very affordable. So that if I were to start with the funnel, that would be where I would go. Do you have any other suggestions? Yeah, well, for those listening, what Elisa's talking about is email sequences, right? And every different email solution provider, or ESP, calls them something differently. In MailChimp, it's automation and workflows. In ConvertKit, it's sequences and tags, I think, or campaigns. I don't know. The point is, part of it is usually the biggest challenge, frankly, is us as business owners thinking through that customer journey and what information we can provide and what information they need to guide them into a desired action, and then figuring out the technology. Right. Our mutual friend, Ian, he wants to dive into the technology first, and that's where he gets stuck, and he never figures out the beginning stuff. I had a conversation with him yesterday about this. So what we need to do is come up with those things. Is it 5 emails? Are we going to run into a bunch of if-then kind of branching where we have customers who might need this or might need that or might need this, in which case we do need to figure out how to branch them accordingly? And that's one of the limitations with MailChimp that you touched on. Right. MailChimp's a linear email sequence. Yeah. All right. They're in. You put people into an automation. Let's say it's 5 emails. That's it. You're going to send them 5 emails no matter what throughout that process. Now, after the process, you can put them in another group and send them another automation or whatever the case might be. But the contrary example would be ConvertKit, where, or even ActiveCampaign as another example, you can give people links to click inside of an email, and the result of that link click tags that individual subscriber and allows you to change what they get from that point on. I signed up for a free trial of ConvertKit a couple of weeks ago, and one of their first emails to me was just 2 basic questions. They said, Mike, are you an experienced email marketing user, or is this basically your first time setting up an email provider? And it's just 2 questions, 2 links. And obviously, whichever one I clicked
put me in a different bucket for ConvertKit. I experienced one, of course. I've been doing this for years. And so now I'm getting different information from them. They're focused now in their emails to me on segmentation and highly advanced topics. Whereas I'm sure had I clicked the other link, the content of those emails would have been drastically different.
Yeah, I agree. So what you're talking about really is segmentation. So figuring out where people belong and how best to market to them. And I will say that when I'm creating an email sequence, I write it all out in Google Docs first. So I write the goal of the email. I'll write like who's going to get it, the subject line, and then I'll actually write the email. So it's, like you said, kind of separating the two processes of the content and the thinking and strategizing with actually putting it into the technology and setting up how it works. I find it helpful to kind of to separate it that way.
Right.
So you might too if you're just starting out. So question from Denise. Mike, are you using links to your site pages on your pins and Pinterest?
Well, if I understand the question, absolutely. Every time I write a new piece of content, that gets pinned to my boards multiple times. And obviously I'm encouraging other people to share it. I'm, a huge user of Tailwind Tribes. So I've got 10 tribes where I upload that pin or share that pin to those tribes, so those tribe mates can see it. And every single time that pinnable image is linked back to that particular piece of content.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say there is really no point in pinning anything if it doesn't go back to your website. That's, it's frustrating to pinners to find something, oh, this looks interesting, and then they click on it and doesn't take them anywhere. So definitely give people a place to go and build your website traffic at the same time.
Yeah, I've even gone so far as to see top shelf bloggers and social media users like Peg Fitzpatrick and Dustin Stout. They'll create quote graphics just for the sake of the quote graphic, but then they'll also create a repository on their site for all their quote graphics so that they have someplace to link to when they're pinning their quote graphics.
You absolutely need to, right? So group boards. What about group boards?
Oh, yeah.
How are you finding them?
Group boards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one. I think I have one group board that I own. That's just a general marketing board, and I get requests almost every day for people to join it, which is nice. And then I'm members of probably a couple dozen other group boards, mostly regarding blogging and social media in general. I'm in a few Pinterest group boards, a Facebook group board, some old Google Plus group boards, because we used to talk about Google Plus a lot, but we don't anymore. So a few dozen, which is nice, because then whenever I have a new piece of content, I usually have at least 10 boards that I could pin that to. Yeah. And again, I'm going to do another commercial for Tailwind. That's why I love Tailwind, because I've got the new piece of content, just like I did this morning. I hit the Tailwind button, my Chrome extension, and I'll see all the images on that page. I'll click the tall pinnable image, and then I can begin to select all the boards. And I can pick and choose which boards are appropriate. And that's one thing, too. I only pin to boards that are appropriate. I'm not going to spam all of my boards. I don't spam all of my Facebook groups. I do share content to a lot of Facebook groups because I'm in a lot of blogging groups. But the point I was going to mention is that within Tailwind, I can use an interval. So I can make sure that I'm not pinning the same image to 10, 20 boards instantly. I can space that out over the course of a week, a month, whatever the case might be.
Yeah. And are you using board lists as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I love that. Oh my gosh, that's so awesome.
So I have a board list that's like my promoted pin content, and all the boards that would fit on is in one board list. So then I just say, okay, schedule to my promoted pins board list and set an interval and go. It's done.
Yep.
Love that. Okay, so we have a quick question here from, oh boy, Anouk. Sorry. It says, I've written a few Christmas-related blog posts, and I've seen a huge peak in traffic. How do I keep that momentum once Christmas is over? And are you saying you're getting a lot of Pinterest traffic? I'm going to assume yes, unless you say otherwise.
It could be Pinterest traffic. It could be organic traffic. I love that question, Anouk, because I've actually written to that topic before, and it has to do with seasonal content. Now, the question you asked was, how do I keep that going after Christmas? And unfortunately, the answer is probably you won't until next Christmas. Because if it really is Christmas content, I got to be honest, no one's going to be interested in that in February, probably. But the beauty there is that if it does well, particularly if we're talking about organic search, if it does well organically now, it'll do even better next year.
Yep,
I've got a blog post that's about Veterans Day, and it's about social media content, how businesses can prepare for Veterans Day, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's great because every year, right around November 1st, it starts to pick up traffic, and that peaks on the 11th, and then it goes away for 12 months, and then it comes back next year. Same thing with a Valentine's Day article that I wrote. That one gets tons of traffic mid-February every single year, and then by the 15th, it's gone.
Yeah. And the nice thing about Pinterest traffic is that your Christmas related traffic will start to pick up in September. So you don't have to wait the whole year for that to start picking up. But yeah, depending on what it is, you might have to wait a few months before it comes back. But this is the question I am selfishly asking, and hopefully others will appreciate it too. But how do you write so quickly? I know you do. Give us some tips on how to blog faster.
Sure. And no, you're right. I mean, I get asked that a lot because generally speaking, I do write really quickly, and I'm not a good typist. I will stare at the keyboard. If I'm thinking about it, I'll look up and I'll type the way that, I was taught to type, and it's not that fast. So it's not because I'm a super, super fast typer. The thing that works the best for me is making sure that I'm writing about stuff I know. That might sound silly, but to a lot of people, when they go to write a blog post, sometimes they'll choose a topic that they don't really know that much about, but they think it's something they need to blog about. So they turn it into a research paper, and they spend hours Googling other people's content and articles and news stories or whatever the case might be. And they try to pull it all into a blog article, and it takes more time. It feels forced. Right? For some of us, it brings back memories of college and high school that we don't want. And so it's not a good process. What the blogger's mindset helps you do is keep your focus on sharing what you know. Y'all know stuff, right? Y'all been doing this for a long time, as they say, and if you could just tap that knowledge and funnel that into what you're saying on the blog post, and worry less about the research, worry less about answering questions that you're not even sure what the answer is, and focus on sharing your stories, sharing your experiences, sharing your information, your knowledge that's in your head. The writing comes a lot faster.
You are so right. And I have to say that I've kind of done it the opposite way. As I've came into the business and I guess it was 2010. The whole thing really started happening. If I didn't know how to do something, I would go figure it out and blog about it. And part of that was to get it into my head more. And part of it was so that when I forgot, I would have it written in my own words. The other part, of course, was to be helpful to other people. But you're right. It does take a lot longer. And then in contrast, on last week when I wrote a blog post about hashtags and promoted pins, oh my goodness, that just kind of flew out. Or some I've written for Tailwind is just, I could probably do it in my sleep, but that's not the norm for me, I have to say. I do enjoy a research project, but if you need it quick, do something you already know, and chances are somebody else doesn't know it. So
that's not to say you shouldn't ever tackle some of those harder topics. That's not to say you shouldn't document the things that you're doing. Particularly in our space, this works really well. I struggled with how to have multiple digital offers. Like we've been talking about these ebooks, right? Yeah. I struggled with how to do that in MailChimp. I didn't know how to set it up so that an existing subscriber could download my latest offer. Because if you do it the way MailChimp kind of tells you to do it, it doesn't work. They get an error message because they're already a subscriber. So I had to figure that out, and then I had to document it. And even then, even though I had figured it out, it's still highly technical, really.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to walk myself back through each of the steps that I took, all the different tools I used, the different ways that you could do it. And that took time. It just did. But if you mix those longer posts with more easygoing, more easily flowing posts that are just sharing what's already in your mind, your overall blogging will do a lot better.
Yeah, and what's funny is when I write those, the things that are already in my head, like how to make money blogging, how to use Pinterest to make money blogging. It's like, well, that's in my head. Those are the ones people tend to really like.
Yeah.
so there's a lot of reward for writing that way. Denise wants to know, do you use what's trending when you do your blog posts, or do you just stick to what you know most of the time?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's one of the main types of blog posts that I teach people to at least consider writing. Now, not every industry, not every blogger or business can use trending topics, but if you can, they can be awfully powerful. Now, it's a challenge, because if you blog about a trending topic, you have to realize that most of the time, once that topic is no longer trending, your blog post won't be trending either. Okay. So those are usually short-term boosts in traffic, but they could be really big boosts. There's the potential there for a lot of viral traffic. In fact, one of the examples I used in my How to Start a Blog book was an article that I wrote about Vine. Y'all remember Vine? Yeah, the 6-second video social network, right? That was, it did okay. They eclipsed over 100 million users. Again, another purchase by Twitter, and again, another network that Twitter shut down. They shut them down last October. They released a blog post announcing that Vine was shutting down. And I saw it. It was late on a Thursday afternoon. I monitored these things, so I got a notification that the Vine blog had a new entry, and I looked at it, and it was something like important news for Vine users or something like that, kind of ominous sounding, right? So I read it, and I was like, holy cow. This is one of the top, at the time, it was one of the top 8 social networks in terms of active users. It was going away. And as I read the article, I noticed that there were a lot of things that they didn't really talk about, like what to do with your vines. What should people do now? I knew people personally, like Zach King, they'd made an entire business out of vines. What are they supposed to do now? So I figured that stuff out, and I wrote a quick blog post. Didn't take me very long, and it went viral, and it rocketed to the #1 spot on Google search for people looking for what's happening to Vine. And it got tremendous amounts of traffic, still gets hundreds of visitors today, over a year later, because at some point, Vine actually did shut down, and the sentiment shifted from what's happening to Vine to what happened to Vine.
Yeah.
So I changed my title, and I changed some of the text, and I kept it updated. So now, again, it's gotten, 250,000 page views over the past 12 months. That was huge for me. Yeah. That doesn't happen all the time.
But I've seen you do it before with other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can work.
Yeah, so it can work. So yeah, blogging about trending topics is great. Love doing that.
Yeah. Okay. So in your article and in your blog post and in your ebook, you write about finding your voice and why that's so important when you're blogging. And so can you explain that quickly?
Yeah. So, and I am by no means an expert in blogging voice. I should say that right off the bat. There's plenty of other people like Jeff Goins who talk about this way more eloquently than I do.
Yeah, but you do it.
But everyone's got to do it. Everyone has a blogging voice, whether they know it or not. And in the article, I compare it just to the way that we speak, right? I speak a certain way. I have an accent. I'm speaking English. I'm talking about things a certain way. I'm joking around, or I'm not. Using certain levels of words, big words, small words, whatever the case might be. I might be using a cadence with that when I speak, which I do sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so those are all factors into what a lot of people would just call your personality, the kind of person that you are when you're having a normal conversation with somebody. The way that you write is exactly the same way. You write with a certain personality. What I'm trying to get people to do in that section of the article is to just consciously think about it. What is going to be your blogging voice? How are you going to write? Who are you writing to? What styles are you going to use? Are you going to be serious? Are you going to bring in pop culture references? Like today's post, I had 2 GIFs and they were both Harry Potter GIFs. And, that's really, me. And I'm sure nobody who's ever read my stuff before was surprised that I had a big GIF of Dumbledore going in the middle of my blog post.
Yeah, that's you.
That's the way I write.
Yep.
I use stuff like that, but other people might not want to use GIFs, particularly not a pop culture GIF, because some people might think that deadens the level of professionalism or seriousness of a particular post, and they might not want that, which is fine if that fits you and your audience. You make that determination, but it should be very deliberate.
Okay, well, I challenge everyone listening now. You've heard Mike speak. So if you go check out that blog post, I think you're going to find that it's just like hearing Mike speak. So I think he's a great example of that. Anouk says that she's struggling to find her blogging voice, experimenting with long, full of images blog posts, which is a great idea, by the way. 50 plus ideas about a home decor topic. Also great for Pinterest because you can make all 50 of them into a different image that leads back to that same article. The average time on the posts are so low. Any ideas how to balance that out?
Yeah, so average time spent on posts, that's a great point to bring up, because that's one of the main ranking factors that Google looks at. And what we're talking about here is every single time somebody comes to one of your articles, Google starts a timer and they start counting how many seconds that individual spends on that article. And then over the course of hours, days, weeks, months, and years, they develop an average time on site for a particular piece of content and your average time on site overall. Right. The higher that average time, that means the more time people spending on average on your content, that sends a positive signal to Google. They wouldn't be spending multiple minutes on your site if they didn't like it. So what can we do to increase that metric? And my number one favorite technique is to embed video.
That's a great idea.
And this show is a perfect example of what I love to teach people to do, particularly if you don't like to write. Okay, so if you in the audience do not like to write, pay attention right now. Do what Elisa's doing right now. Find somebody else who's an expert in your niche and interview them. Okay, Elisa took the time to set all this up. She came up with some questions. She shared them with me in advance, so I had some time to think about it and make sure, there wasn't anything that was like, whoa, I don't know how to answer that. And now we're doing this interview, and we're creating an hour's worth of content. Do you know how many words are an hour's worth of content? It's like 5,000 words or something like that, particularly if you talk as fast as I do when you're answering a question. So you've got this video. You do the live interview with somebody. Once the interview's done, you've got a recorded video that you can send up to Fiverr and pay $50 for somebody to transcribe it. Now you've got a 4,500 to 5,000 word blog post, which is massive. But the real key here to this particular point is you can take this video and you can upload it to YouTube and then embed it on the blog post. And so the first thing somebody sees when they come to this blog post from that day on is a 1 hour long video.
Yeah, and even if they only watch 2 minutes of it,
yeah, right. Up your time on site.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that is what I do with these. So this will be on a blog post on Tailwind.
Yeah. Now whether it's video or audio, you can do the same thing. You could do a if you don't like video, you could do a Skype call and record an interview and turn that into a podcast, and then upload that to SoundCloud, and then embed the player in the blog post. You do the transcript for Google purposes, but you do the player for the reader who doesn't want to read.
Right. Great suggestions. And a lot of the things you mentioned before, like giving CTAs to send people to other pages, will still increase that time on site, even if it's not on that one page. And I think, too, knowing pinners better will help you design a website that is more appealing to them. So if you have gorgeous photos, and I don't know your website, so I'm not saying this is the case, but if you have beautiful photos on Pinterest and then they go to your website and it's not pretty, they are going to leave real fast because they are in a Pinterest mindset and they want more pretty stuff. So that would be another suggestion. So I do have one question here that is very Pinterest related. Would you suggest using Board Booster with Tailwind in order to remove underperforming pins in bulk, especially if you have a lot of pins, or does Tailwind or another site offer this? Can I take this one?
Be my guest.
Okay.
I know you want to.
I do. I just wish Kate All were here, because anytime someone mentions deleting pins, I see the steam come out of her ears. No, I do not suggest deleting underperforming pins for a couple of reasons. One is that it's a waste of time. Two is that your pin could be around for months before it finally really takes off and starts bringing you in a ton of traffic. And I have seen this with my own eyes. So do not spend the time on that. Spend the time creating blog posts and content that you can promote on Pinterest. And I would also be very careful when using tools to use a partner approved tool like Tailwind is, and there are others that are, but there are a lot of them that are not. So that would be my answer. What do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Particularly with the main point of, don't you have better things to do than
I know you do. I know.
Pin? Yeah, and I'll bring it back to a blogging related example, because I was just having this conversation yesterday with a mutual friend about deleting email subscribers. And we were spending a lot of time trying to sort out the logic, because MailChimp is particularly bad about this. MailChimp's Boolean logic for identifying inactive subscribers is just flat out wrong. So it's really hard to know when you've got a group of subscribers that haven't opened or read any of your emails for a long time. So we're trying to sort this out, and it's all to save $5-10 a month, something like that, right? By reducing the number of subscribers and to make ourselves feel better, because our open rate looks a little bit better. And I said, you know what? It occurred to me, and this just occurred to me yesterday. So I'm not, touting my own horn. This just occurred to me yesterday. If I'd have spent all that time focused on better monetizing that email list to begin with, and make more money from the email subscribers that are there,
Yeah.
Wouldn't that have been a better use of my time?
Yeah.
Right. So that's, yeah, don't waste time.
Right. And I think a lot of experts will give you all these tips that you should do. But you know what? That's the very last thing in the world you need to be worried about. So really think about what's going to make the money come in for you, so you can keep doing this. And blogging, so important to make that Pinterest traffic happen. So I hope that you have some good ideas. Let's see if there are any last minute questions. Azure's here. Oh, she agrees. No deleting underperforming pins. And they do pop up later on a lot of times. So we have some good tips from Tim and Eileen, but I don't want to keep you too long, Mike. The tips are great, and please, please, please go read that blog post. I put the link in the comments a couple of times, and get that PDF. I'm going to get the PDF, because even though my printer hates me, I will make it printed out because there are some things in there, like that outlining process, so basic, and yet I forget to do it every time. So thank you very much. You have helped my blogging, and I know you've helped other people's, and excited to see what you do next. And in fact, on that note, don't you have another book coming out?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I actually started on a new book, and I started it earlier this year. And it's just called The Blogger's Mindset. And what I wanted to do with that book was focus on a lot of the advanced techniques, how to create this blogger's mindset, and other kinds of advanced techniques like influencer marketing and so many other things that can really come into, creating a great blog. And as I started to write it, I got stuck, because there were these basic concepts like, what platform do I use? And those kinds of things that I didn't want to cover in this book. I didn't want that to be what this new book was about, but I hadn't covered them previously. So I went back and said, okay, I need a primer for blogging. I need to create how to start a blog first, and then do this more advanced book. So that's what it'll be. It'll be The Blogger's Mindset. It'll be out next year. It'll be an ebook and print, probably on Amazon. We don't know yet. Okay. But yeah, it'll build off what you've learned in how to start a blog. So it'll be great for people who've been blogging for a long time, or people who are just 6 months in.
Okay, awesome. And how can we make sure that we don't forget how to find you and forget what the book is called, and so we miss it and our lives are just not the same? What do we do?
The best tip I can give is to go to How to Start a Blog. The link, like you said, is in there, and sign up to have that PDF emailed to you, because then you'll also see when, I'll let you know, obviously next year, when the new book comes out, you'll be on my list, so you'll hear from me, and you'll get all the content that I create, all the articles that I write going forward. Like you wouldn't have missed today's article, which was great if you're interested in making money off of blog posts. And not such a bad idea.
No, not at all. So please hurry up, because we want to have you on to talk about that.
No, okay. I'll keep writing.
Don't forget, the links are in the chat. Yeah, that's right. Keep writing, and everybody else, keep writing too. And I'm going to try to get faster this year. That'll be my goal. Before your book comes out, I will be faster.
Awesome.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody, for being here.